What's with the money that's out of circulation? Like you said a while ago, that there is most likely massive amounts of money outside of circulation owned by billionaires. It's not most likely. We know that it is. Yeah, that's not a most likely thing. We know that for a fact. Yeah, but that has to do with the velocity of money. Okay. Okay. This is actually really fundamental to understanding like post-Keynesian economics and how you fix these problems in a modern monetary context. And I don't mean that MMT. I mean like modern, like now. Okay. I don't mean MMT. But MMT theorists are right on some stuff. But I disagree with them on some stuff, and I don't think their theories work that well if you're not the international reserve currency. Okay. Like, understand it this way, all right? Imagine that you have a total money pool of USD that is 10 trillion. No matter what, the amount of money that exists in the economy is 10 trillion. In reality, it's more complicated, but let's simplify, okay? Now, let's say that we're doing this in an unequal economic system like capitalism, where money flows upwards over time, right? So after a year of business transactions and so on, let's make it really simple. It's 10 trillion, and you give a bunch of money out to everyone in the economy in the form of like wages and supplemental checks and subsidies and tax rebates and so on. Everyone starts the year with a bunch of money, right? And then economic transactions take place. And over the course of a year, the money flows upward, right? You are, a regular guy. You don't own property. You don't own a business. You don't own the means of production. So when you spend your money, you are buying other people's goods and services. The money leaves you and goes to other people. Meanwhile, if you own a bunch of property or you own a bunch of businesses, in addition to the money that you receive from the beginning, other people are giving you money. So money flows upward, right? The total amount of money in the economy remains the same, but over time, it becomes more unequal. People down there at the bottom have much less and are, trading for a pittance for what they can, working for a pittance. People at the top have an enormous amount, and they can get even more too, because once you have lots of money, you benefit from stuff like the economy of scale. There are more ways to make more money if you already have more money. Why does it flow up? That's just how capitalism works. So anyway, right? At the end of the day, everyone has the economy still contains 10 trillion. Now, the idea for taxation under a government, okay? The idea is that you pull money from the economy, eradicate it, and then redistribute, in this example, the same amount of money out to more equitably distribute it. So let's say you have a progressive taxation system like the US did back in 1946, and you tax a fuck ton of money from the wealthy, some money from normal people, and from the poor, nothing. You take a bunch of it, and you, the government, have not like assembled a big bank account or whatever. You have not like taken the money and put it in a vault. You've eradicated it from the economy. It doesn't exist anymore. The money is not there. And you've marked it down in your book. Let's say you tax a total of 5 trillion. And then with all that money, you then go about funding all the stuff the government does, all the federal, state, and municipal programs, trillions and trillions of dollars of stuff. And it goes into wages and it goes into programs, and the money goes out to people and it's redistributed, right? You are creating that money. You are not taking the taxes and putting them back out there. You are creating that money. That is new money that you are producing. Your job as the Fed, as the government, is to maintain the value of this currency, to make sure that it does its job, facilitating transactions, allowing people to engage in commerce, and allowing the nation to remain stable. It is like the money does not exist outside the trust the government allows you to afford in it, okay? Now, a problem we have in the modern day economy is that the velocity of money is very, very low relative to how it used to be. It used to be, as recently as 50, 60, 70 years ago, that a significant portion of the amount of money that existed in the economy was being moved around in regular day-to-day transactions. Even wealthy people would buy stuff like big yachts, but big yachts are a purchase that go to companies that pay wages, A wealthy person buying a big yacht isn't that bad in terms of like overall economic health. People got paid to make that yacht, ideally. I hope they weren't slaves. That's fine, right? The problem is that nowadays, ultra-wealthy people don't buy things with their money. They sit on huge hoards of money that are accumulated through speculative investment on the stock market, and they then, rather than spend that money, they leverage it by using it as collateral to take loans with interest rates, interest payment expectations that are lower than the expected rate of return on future investments. So rather than use their money, they use the fact that they have so much money as collateral to secure loans to invest, which means that none of the money actually moves in purchases. The velocity of money goes down. So we're dealing with like a bunch of problems that stem from the fact that A, debt as a concept is destructive to society, in my humble opinion, and B, the government is not doing its job of making sure that money is being circulated through the economy. Instead, more and more and more and more of it is just hovering up at the top in a big bubble. That's the gist of it. It's not being like spent. If the wealthy, like it didn't used to be this way. If the wealthy were spending their money, even if they were making it back, it wouldn't be as much of a problem. Tell me, would the wealthy be as much of a problem as they are today if their wealth circulated in the form of them paying out very high wages, which you then spend on your groceries and your, luxury goods and so on, and the money then flows back up to them, but then they just pay it right back down to you, like the Ford model line, the idea that if you circulate a very large amount of money, since you own the factories, it does come back up to you, but you have to keep that cycle moving. We're in a race to the bottom right now. We're on the other side of the equation, where rather than lots of money being reinvested to keep the velocity of money high, all the money is pulling up, It's like the water cycle. It's like you have a basin or like a ravine in a mountain range, and all the water pools down in it. When the snow melts, all the water trickles down through the plants and the soil and the rocks and so on, and it pools into this crater in the center. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the water cycle requires that water to circulate. All the plants up on top of the mountain can't survive unless they get water too. And in the real world, we get that because of evaporation from the basin, right? The little lake that forms in the basin, it evaporates, it becomes clouds, and it rains down, and that allows the plants along the mountain to stay healthy. But if you were somehow to prevent the evaporation, you would just have more and more water over time pooling down at the bottom until eventually nothing moved. And when nothing is moving, all the plants up there at the top die. If you invest money, the money is doing stuff. Not if the people who receive the invested money are just using it like to fill out their portfolio. No. It's not continuing to move. The whole idea, like if you spend your money at a drugstore and then the owner of the drugstore spends it to fix their window, and the window fixer then goes and spends it like buying groceries, and the grocer then spends it, so on and so on. Like that's money moving. That's velocity. If you invest in a stock, and that stock, the value of that stock then just sits in a guy's, speculative wealth assessment, just like a giant bubble of money that never moves. It only gets like leveraged. That doesn't fix it. Yes, this is why stock buybacks should not be legal. Sometime I ask myself why you have a good amount of knowledge about macroeconomy, even you did get a degree in it. Well, I'll fill in the blanks and say, no, I didn't get a degree in it. I have a sociology bachelor's degree. But the macroeconomic stuff is really, 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 really important. For one, I'm not an expert. I only know the broadest strokes, right? It just sounds fancy because a lot of people don't talk about monetary policy. That's one. And for two, man, I feel like a lot of people on the left don't even, because I've made this point before, and I have to double down on it and triple down on it, okay? The world is very complicated, and a lot of the problems will be very difficult to solve. A lot of the problems we're experiencing, but some things are simpler than we think. And the truth is, if we just implemented a genuine, across-the-board, no tax loophole, progressive taxation policy, and used government programs to redistribute that wealth and changed nothing else about the economy, the raw amount of money in this country, just the unbelievable amount of wealth we have in this country, it'd be heaven on earth for the American working class. And I think a lot of people forget this a lot, because you get kind of like, it's important to understand these things they're not created by changing the amount of wealth that exists or by being more efficient. The wealth is already there. The efficiency is already there. The productive forces are already there. The only problem is that all of that money is hoarded at the top. And I know this is not like a radical proposition, but it's important to remind yourself, because sometimes people get so in the weeds. Yeah, as Thana points out here, like the average income of a person in Mississippi, GDP per capita, we'll say GDP per capita is higher in Mississippi than it is in Barcelona. But Barcelona is beautiful, and Mississippi is a shithole. Part of it is how much that wealth actually circulates, right? and the ways in which it circulates, you know? GDP could refer to, like, if one family has a GDP per capita of like $40,000, right? So one family, $40,000, right? Not per capita, it's just the one family, right? 40,000 in that household, you know? That could be a lump sum of $40,000 of wealth as a unit there, like averaged for that family, with very, very, very little velocity, you know? It could just be like, oh, you got the money, you sit on it. Maybe you pay it to your fucking health insurance provider. Or it can be robust and dynamic and energetic, you know? It could be going in wages to a guy who lives in Barcelona and he's like giving it to the coffee shop and he's giving it to the bookstore and da-da. It's all circulating around. And even if the amount of money they possess, like in an absolute sense, is less at any given point, Americans are very wealthy. Even poor Americans relative to other countries are pretty wealthy, you know? But it doesn't feel like it because it doesn't fucking circulate. GDP is much more a measure of economic velocity than it is raw wealth, after all. I mean, if you think about it, like, no, nothing. I'm overstating the point. If we implement that monetary policy, what's the mechanism for enforcement of that policy for the people administrating it? How do we not end up like the USSR? I don't know what you mean. I didn't really describe anything that does anything that has anything to do with the USSR. I'm just talking about progressive taxation. Mind you, I don't want to stop with progressive taxation, you know? That's just a very basic starting point. I'm just saying we have so much wealth, and so much of it is because basically what I'm saying is that I believe in economic abundance, not just because I want to deregulate, you know, zoning or housing construction or whatever. I believe that there's gold in them there mountains. We just have to go mining for them. It's right out there. How do we enforce wealth redistribution practically? I mean, we already do it to an extent, just not enough. We had it in this country back in the 1940s and 50s to an extent that I would consider a lot more appropriate. If what you mean is like, how do we suppress the capital class to prevent them from lobbying and engaging in regulatory capture that leads to the tax rates being lowered again? Well, that's when you need the socialism. The point that I'm making here is just that, like, provision for people's basic needs is, as far as I'm concerned, already covered, right? Like, the fact that this is even a question in our society is an abomination. Transfer the military budget to the IRS. But that's the thing, right? Like, even the amount we spend in the military is peanuts compared to the amount we could be making every year via taxes if we just did taxes correctly, you know? Then as the peasant, I don't know what the fuck, I don't know how you would, I don't know what gulags has to do with this. I'm just talking about taxation. I mean, if people break the law, they would be charged. Like, if they don't get, like, if they owe taxes but don't pay them, like, there could be legal consequences.